Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Look, we all do it, right? You're scrolling through your feed, your brain is tired, and boom, you pause on a fluffy panda tumbling down a slide. It feels good. It's just a harmless, quick dopamine hit. But what if I told you that beneath the surface of those innocent little clips lies a massive, mostly unseen iceberg? Today, we are diving deep into the complex and honestly, kind of dark world of viral animal content. We're going to unpack how our deeply human desire for connection is actually warping the reality of the animal kingdom. And worse, how it's fueling a multi-million-dollar industry of outright exploitation. So get comfortable, because we're venturing way beyond the innocent illusions on our screens. Let's kick things off with a piece of footage you've almost certainly seen. It's from Werner Herzog's documentary, Encounters at the End of the World. The scene is just stark, quiet, and deeply unsettling. We're looking at a solitary Adelie penguin. But instead of diving into the nutrient-rich ocean with the rest of its colony to, eat and survive, this single bird just turns its back on the water. It starts walking inland, directly toward the barren, icy interior of Antarctica. Literally a 5,000-kilometer march into absolute nothingness. No food, no water, absolutely zero hope of survival. As the documentary famously points out, the rules for humans down there are super strict. You do not stop the penguin. You just have to stand there and watch it go. Over the years, that haunting little clip took on an entire life of its own online. The internet actually dubbed this creature the nihilist penguin. The clip went massively viral, shared by millions of users who basically projected their own feelings of profound exhaustion right onto this tiny bird. I mean, think about it. The penguin became a mascot for our modern era, a symbol for anyone who has ever felt totally overwhelmed by the relentless, deafening noise of society and just wanted to walk away from the whole shebang. People saw a romantic rebellion. They saw a hero choosing the silence of the mountains over the chaotic chatter of the colony. We looked at a bird and we literally saw ourselves. But, okay, here is where we hit the jarring contrast between our poetic internet narrative and the hard, cold, biological reality. When you actually look at the scientific facts, the truth hits you like freezing water. According to neurologists who study this kind of behavior, this solitary march, it isn't an existential crisis. It's not some bold act of rebellion against penguin society. It is a tragic neurological glitch. See, penguins rely on a highly complex internal GPS. They use the Earth's magnetic field, the sun, environmental clues, all of it to navigate. When that system misfires, which usually happens due to an infection, parasites, or extreme starvation, they experience what scientists call visuospatial dysfunction. It's a complete, total failure of the brain's navigation system. To put it into perspective, it functions very similarly to how Alzheimer's disease works in humans. To really grasp the weight of this, we have a profound quote from Dr. Rahul Chawla, a neurologist who actually analyzed this exact footage. He points out something heartbreaking. Patients with Alzheimer's don't wander off because they're depressed or because they just want to escape it all. They wander because their spatial processing is fundamentally broken. As he puts it, they step out because their home no longer feels like their own. The penguin isn't a nihilist making a conscious choice. It's a deeply confused animal whose brain has literally mapped a false route to safety over an impossible mountain range. It is a heartbreaking reality, and it's completely stripped of all that human romanticism we slapped onto it. Section 1. Projecting our human emotions, the illusion of the cheating penguin. Okay, remember that huge viral cheating penguin video? You know the one. A husband penguin aggressively fighting a quote-unquote homewrecker over his wife. We so enthusiastically mapped a whole human soap opera onto them, but we completely missed the reality of the situation. Adelie penguins do not have a concept of marriage, fidelity, or infidelity. That's just us projecting again. In reality, they are hyperactive survivors living in absolutely brutal environments. They build their nests out of these highly valuable pebbles, which leads to vicious, bloody fights over nesting materials and mating rights, not romantic love. They form complex dual parenting shifts out of pure, calculated survival instincts. By forcing our human morality onto them, we miss out on the fascinating raw biological drive that actually governs their lives. To really understand why we keep doing this, we can look to a classic piece of literature. Legal scholar Taylor Waters wrote a fascinating paper on animal exhibition, and she draws an incredible analogy to the character Lenny from John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. If you recall, Lenny is this gentle giant who loves soft animals so much that he pets them too hard. He unintentionally destroys the very things he loves because he simply lacks the context and understanding of his own strength. Honestly, as consumers of internet animal content, we are a lot like Lenny. Our love for these animals is totally genuine, But it's dangerously superficial. We enthusiastically consume and share this content without understanding the crushing weight of the industries we are inadvertently supporting with our clicks. Section 2. The dark side of cute, the unseen abyss of social media. So what happens when our superficial, Lenny-like love for animals collides with social media algorithms? Well, it gets incredibly destructive. The engine driving this whole mess is something called the cycle of infantilization. We humans have a hardwired psychological vulnerability to things that look like babies. Big eyes, clumsy movements, it instantly triggers our caregiving instincts. Think about how we view pandas. We see them as helpless, wobbly toddlers that would surely die without our constant intervention. On social media, creators ruthlessly exploit this. They keep wild, exotic animals perpetually infantile, dressing primates up in little doll clothes or treating wildcats like domestic house pets. And this normalizes unnatural dependency. It sends this toxic message that these wild creatures exist merely to be our babies, which directly fuels the illegal pet trade, roadside zoos, and massive exploitative content farms. Let me give you a grim, fully documented example of this from the SMAC report. That's the Social Media Animal Cruelty Coalition. Researchers found a video of a quote-unquote pet macaque monkey. The monkey had supposedly broken a bowl. As its punishment, it was dressed in children's doll clothes, looking visibly terrified, and forced to stand straight against a wall like a naughty toddler in timeout. When the report was compiled, this exact video had been viewed over 550,000 times, over 500,000 views. This right here is the intense cognitive dissonance of the internet. 500,000 people watched documented systematic psychological torture of a wild animal and hit the like button just because they thought it was cute. Section 3. Social media's lucrative Wild West, profiting from the exotic animal trade. You might be wondering, why on earth are there so many of these videos? The answer is simple. We are operating in social media's extremely lucrative Wild West. These tech platforms are literally designed to keep your eyeballs glued to the screen, heavily incentivizing rapid, highly engaging content. Look at this number. $15 billion. In just a 3-month period investigated by the SMOGME report, content creators pushing obvious intentional animal cruelty collectively earned an estimated $15 million. This isn't just pocket change for a hobby. It is an incredibly lucrative shadow economy built entirely on the suffering of living creatures, and it's funded directly by our passive scrolling and viewing. And don't think for a second that the platforms hosting this content aren't getting their cut too. In that exact same 3-month window, it's estimated that YouTube alone pocketed $12 million. $12 million, just from running advertisements on these horrific animal cruelty videos. When the financial incentive to look the other way is that staggering, it's no wonder the problem persists. When we break down exactly where this content lives, the data is incredibly skewed. A massive 89.2% of the obvious intentional cruelty content tracked by the SMAC report was housed directly on YouTube. Now, to be fair, this doesn't necessarily mean YouTube itself is creating more cruelty, but it absolutely highlights that YouTube is overwhelmingly the easiest place to find it, house it, and most importantly, monetize it. But listen, YouTube is definitely not alone in this. There is a fierce race to the bottom happening right now between platforms. While YouTube has the larger overall user base, TikTok has just exploded. It has higher average watch times, massive rapid growth, and it heavily features animal trends. Influencers are basically shotgunning their videos across both platforms to maximize their reach. They are effectively normalizing illegal exotic pet ownership to billions of people daily. The platforms rake in massive profits, the creators get rich, and the animals, they pay the ultimate price. Section 4. Laws lacking real teeth, the global enforcement failure. At this point, you're probably asking yourself, wait, aren't there laws against this? Well, the uncomfortable truth is that global enforcement is largely failing. Let's compare how different governments are actually handling this crisis. In England, they've set up some pretty robust regulations. They explicitly require licenses for keeping animals for exhibition, which brilliantly covers digital recordings and social media displays. Pretty smart, right? But then you look at the United States, where the Animal Welfare Act is rarely ever enforced against online creators. And in China, the complete lack of broad national animal cruelty laws fuels a thriving, completely unregulated underground market. Over there, abuse is frequently streamed to private chat groups for direct profit. To highlight just how fundamentally broken the U.S. system is, consider this wild fact. The Animal Legal Defense Fund actually had to file a lawsuit against the USDA because of their complete lack of enforcement against massive social media influencers. The lawsuit revealed something shocking. When inspectors do manage to find severe violations of the Animal Welfare Act, and we're talking dangerous conditions, dead animals, or entirely fake rescue operations, they often avoid issuing any official citations. Instead, they issue what they call teachable moments. I mean, can you imagine? You're running a highly profitable, highly illegal exotic animal content farm, and your only punishment from the federal government is a polite little teachable moment? The loopholes here are absolutely massive. Section 5. Bearing the uncomfortable reality. Looking in the mirror. So governments are failing, and the platforms are heavily profiting. But ultimately, we are the ones providing the demand. A few years back, the World Wildlife Fund released a truly shocking video. It showed a colony of penguins desperately trying to survive on a massive floating island of ocean plastic. Naturally, the internet was completely outraged. People were demanding answers left and right. But twist, it turned out the video was actually a digitally manipulated hoax created by the WWF themselves. Why would they do that? Because they knew that sometimes we need to be aggressively jolted out of our complacency. We literally need to see a nightmare visualized right in front of us before we even begin to recognize the reality of our daily behaviors. And honestly, that is exactly the kind of jolt we need right now when it comes to our endless consumption of digital animal content. The poet T.S. Eliot famously wrote, "Humankind cannot bear very much reality." And I've got to say, nowhere is this more glaringly evident than in how we engage with the animal kingdom online. We much prefer the comforting illusion. We want to believe the penguin is a romantic nihilist making a brave choice. We want to believe that the terrified macaque in a tiny dress is just a happy little toddler playing around. We desperately want to feel connected, to feel just a little less lonely in our own digital worlds. And so we consume these cute moments, actively refusing to bear the reality of the loneliness and the horrific exploitation that our clicks actually support. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. We all have a profound responsibility as consumers in this digital age. The very next time the algorithm serves you a video of an exotic wild animal hanging out in a living room or a primate forced to wear human clothes, just pause for a second before you click like. Ask yourself, what reality am I actually sharing here? Am I looking at a genuinely cared for animal, or am I unknowingly funding an unseen abyss of cruelty? Thank you so much for joining me today, and I really hope this gives you a completely new lens through which to view your feed.